Okay, my name is Richard Chiounard, more commonly known as Riz by all my friends and relatives and so forth. I'm going to give you a little story of some of my military experiences. I hope it'd be of interest. 1942, December, I was drafted into the military service. Went to Fort Sheridan, and from Fort Sheridan went to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, where they assigned to the combat engineers. Now, combat engineers, their job is to build bridges over rivers, build roads in swamps, to lay out minefields and pick up minefields, to set booby traps for the enemy when you evacuate, and also to pick up booby traps when you go in to take over a position. So this sounds like a real interesting occupation, but not to my liking. After my training in the combat engineers, I had an opportunity to take the written test and the physical test to get into the cadets, to get into the Air Force. I passed the written with flying colors and also passed the physical, so I was able to get into the cadets. So from there I went to Knoxville, Tennessee to be inducted into the cadets. And after going there, we went to Montgomery, Alabama for what they call pre-flight school. There you learn a lot of the mathematics and things about flying and that you have to know. And a little interesting point, most people have to have at least 2 years of college to get into the cadets, and a surprising 20% fail pre-flight school. And pre-flight, they have the old hazing tradition. You probably have seen some of these exposures they had about your citadels and what have you. And this was going on then at the time. And as an underclassman, which is the first month of your training, you take all the hazing. Then the second half, which is the second month, you do the hazing. But at this time, when we became the upper class, they eliminated the hazing, so there was no more permitted. So that knocked that out. And besides your learning of the different things, they do a lot of military drills. And I was fortunate in having my then girlfriend, Darlene, come to visit me. She got to see some of the action there at the pre-flight. So after pre-flight, you go to primary school, where you start to learn to fly. Started to learn to fly in what they call a PT-17, which is a two-wing plane, and I did very well in that. And I had a little experience there on my first solo flight. I thought I was pretty hot. And my instructor showed me how to fly upside down and make turns and manipulate the airplane. So I thought I would try it. After chasing a few crows, I decided to try this flying upside down. So I did. I get upside down, I start my turn, and the engine quit. Well, it stalled out and I went into an outside spin, which is a little difficult. But I managed to pull it out of the spin, and when I did, the guy wires on those wings were just sagging like a rainbow. But it was just a little experience. You passed by the wayside. So after completing your primary training, we go to basic training. And I'm trying to remember. Cortland, Alabama, I believe, went for went to Clarksdale, Mississippi for the primary, and Cortland, Alabama for basic training. There you fly B-13s, which is a bigger plane, bigger engine, single wing. It gets you a little more closer to a fighter plane. And after 2 months of training there with no unusual happenings of any kind, we'll go on to Selma, Alabama for your final training, your advanced training. which again is a little more powerful airplane. And actually in advanced training you learn instrument flying, you get ground gunnery, skip bombing, aerial gunnery, and you're introduced to all these things. And again, did very well in all of these. Then after graduation, which was about the 9th of January, I returned home, had a 5-day delay en route, no such a thing as a leave. But I did manage to get home, and Darlene and I got married during that 5-day leave. And after that, we returned to Tallahassee, Florida. From there, I was assigned again to Venice, Florida, which was a fighter training base. And first, it was supposed to be 2 months training. The first month, which took a P-47, and took a 1 month training in that, which was aerial gunnery, ground gunnery, and skip bombing as usual, only with a bigger plane. And we had a little bit of an incident there. The aerial gunnery is the plane pulls like a flag-like target, and you shoot at this target. There is a large weight on the bottom to hold it upright. And one man, he started his run, he shot the weight off the flag, and he dove underneath it, and the weight fell and hit his engine and knocked 3 cylinders off. How he did it, I don't know, but he managed to get back and land at the base safely. But after the first month, they changed their mind, took all the P-47s away, and brought us P-40s in. So we did all the same training all over again with aerial gunnery, ground gunnery, skip bombing, training in the P-40, which was quite an experience. We never knew why, who, or what for. We just do as we were told. So after finishing there, well, I was ready to leave overseas. I'm leaving about January 4th to be exact. We left from Miami, Florida. Went down to South America, Buenos Aires. Was there for a few days. And then we went on to Africa, the Gold Coast of Africa, Accra, Africa. And we were there about a week, waiting for another ride. In the meantime, we got to go into the jungle to see how the people lived in that area. And it's just as you see a lot on TV. Small villages with grass huts, grass roofs, dirt floors, and just plain dirt all around. It's a sight to see. Quite an experience. Oh, then we went up to Karachi, India. We had to stop over at Cairo, Egypt for a little gas, and then went on to Karachi, India. And there we're doing a little more training again, about a couple of weeks there. One pilot who had experience in China, on his way home, would be stopped there in Karachi and teach all the new incoming pilots techniques to use and what to expect and what have you. And there again we did some ground gunnery and aerial gunnery, skip bombing, with a slight difference of the aerial gunnery. One plane would fly so that his shadow would be on the ground, and you would use his shadow as a target to get your experience of a flying target. And it was really warm there. Your flying suit would be so wet with sweat, and when it dried out, it would be almost white with the salt from your body, and then almost stand up in a corner. Well, after the training there, there was another pilot from China who would come back to India to lead a flight of these new trainees back to China. Because each one of them would fly a new P-51 over to China. Because that was the only way they could get them over there. And strange thing, we trained in P-40 and P-47s, then we go down to the airport, and they say, well, there's your plane you're going to fly, a P-51. Never sat in one before. So, read all the technical instructions, and that's no big deal. Sit down, get in the plane, take off. We're going on the way. We stopped at Agra, India, where the Taj Mahal is. One of the fellows that was in the flight had a friend there who was a chaplain. And this chaplain, he was quite a bug on the Taj Mahal history and what have you. And he took us to the Taj Mahal for a tour of the Taj Mahal and relating all the historic events that led up to it before and after. And it was very, very interesting. He was well versed on the subject. It's something that not too many people get to see. Well, from there we went on to the next base, which was a jump-off point to go to China, to fly over what they call the hump. I don't know how many people ever heard of the hump, but it's the highest mountain range in the world, and you have to cross that to get into China. And the transport pilots were flying back and forth across there all the time, because that was the only way to get supplies to China, because there was no roads or railroads to get to China. So they had quite a job flying back and forth there all the time. And there was many of those planes lost too, because of bad weather and what have you, because it's very unpredictable. Weather in the mountains like that can change in a matter of an hour. But our flight, we took off and flew over there with no problems at all. We had to fly pretty high, but still we got over there to China and flew to Kunming, which is the headquarters of the 14th Air Force in China. And from there we were assigned again, all of our group that were together were assigned so many pilots to each fighter group over there. And I happened to be assigned to the 118th, which was supposed to be a tactical reconnaissance squadron, but they never did any of that work. They did all strictly fighter work. I think they had one airplane that had a camera in it to take pictures. So it was not really doing the job that the name implied. Matter of fact, we kind of renamed and called ourselves the Black Lightning Squadron. Then went over there. Their headquarters was at Chengkung, which was across the lake from Kunming. But not too much action there. But then I was assigned. They were always off on duty somewhere else in another airfield. Well, I went to Luzhou at the time, and our squadron and all the other squadrons had just evacuated Guilin. The Japanese had run them out of there. What the Japanese aim is to control the whole corridor from up the Yangtze River all the way down to Hong Kong. And they just about had it done. And before they finished with us, they did have it done. But in this case, we gave them a hard time, because I don't remember just too many. I flew 32 missions over there, but I cannot recall that many of them, because I don't know why I threw it out of my mind or what, but I just don't remember them. I do remember one day, though, at Luzhou, the Japanese were trying to push us out. As long as we could get off the ground and attack them, they couldn't get very far. But when the weather socked in and we couldn't get off the ground, they really made tracks coming up against us. We had an American up in the hills, because this was kind of a valley area. And he had a radio, and when the fighter planes would go, he would tell us where the Japanese troops was, where their supplies and everything else. So we really gave them a hard time. Matter of fact, this one day, I remember I flew 5 missions that one day, and I burned up 3 sets of machine guns. When I say burned them up, the barrels get burned out, and then the bullets come out and fly in circles. They don't go straight. But we gave them a hallelujah anyway. But it wasn't too long after that. They did manage to socked in. The weather was about a 100-foot ceiling. We couldn't get off the ground. And they were moving in fast, so we had to evacuate. Well, a lot of our fighter planes were kind of damaged pretty bad. The flight instruments didn't work. Radios were out and everything else, and I was assigned to a P-40 to fly it out with no instruments and no radio. supposed to get on the wing of a C-47, which is a transport plane. It was carrying supplies and the ground personnel out. We were to get on his wing and fly through the overcast. And I got on his wing, and we got how far up, I don't know. But the fighter planes don't fly very slow, and these cargo planes, when they're climbing, they don't fly very fast. And my fighter plane stalled out, and I went into a halfway spin. They have what's called an airplane a needle and ball. Anybody who is familiar with flying will know what I'm talking about. I used that to pull out of the spin. Fortunately, I pulled out in a valley. And all I could see was one end of the valley to the other, and it was mountains all around. So I went to one end of the valley, turned around, and I poured the coal of that thing to climb just as fast as I could possibly climb. And I broke out a little over 10,000 feet out of the overcast. And when I did, there were no other airplanes in sight. And we took off in a hurry with no plans of what direction to go or anything. We just scrambled out of there. So I head in the general direction. Fortunately, I'm going along for a while, and I see a transport, and I recognize that he's going through a landing procedure. So I run over and get on his wing to go down through the overcast with him, because I have no radio and no nothing. So I get down through the overcast, and then the usual procedure, you go by the control tower, wave your wings to let them know you have no radio, and then they clear the path for you. And landed there, and I was sure glad to be there. We stayed there overnight, and the next morning, well, I knew where I was then, where my base was, which was not too far from there, and the clouds were socked in again. But from there to my home base, there was a river valley. The ceiling was probably about 100 feet, so I take off and I go down this, fly up this river valley to get back to my home base. Sure glad to be there. So that was quite an experience. Then we went back to headquarters back at Changkung, and we waited a while till they made another base available for us, another fighter strip. This one happened to be behind enemy lines. By this time, the Japanese had occupied all the way from the Yangtze down to Hong Kong and all that valley, the Kuilin Valley they called it. And our strip that we went to was between that strip and the east coast. So they controlled the coast also. So we were just in between. So we had to have all of our supplies, gasoline, ammunition, everything flown to us because there's no other way to get it. So we gave the Japanese an awful hard time from there, because we would go out and search and look for their troops, look for their supplies and ammunition trucks and everything else, and shoot them up, bomb them, find the troop. We used to carry frag bombs. We dropped the frag bombs on the troops and strafe them and do as much damage as we could. I had one incident where the Japanese had a little habit. They would take a house. When I say a house, it's not like you visualize a house here in America. It's just a bamboo with straw and clay walls, 4 walls, and a window on each side. So they would take one end of these buildings, let out like a garage door, wheel their ammunition trucks or supply trucks, whatever, in there, and close it up. So you could not tell. They would do all their moving at night, and we would go through the daytime to give them a hard time. So we would fly low enough so that we could look through these windows and see if there's any trucks in these houses. People laugh at that, but that's a fact. Anyway, we was going along, and I saw a big straw stack over there, and didn't pay too much attention to it, but when I went by, I says, wow, there's wheels on that straw stack. So I go around and come back, and I strafe it, and I'm going to drop a bomb, and just in strafing, or skip bombing, whichever, you fly straight towards your target at a very low altitude, maybe just a few feet off the ground. And when you get to the target, you pull up to go over it. Well, just as I pulled up to go over it, it must have been an ammunition truck because it blew up. Well, needless to say, it was an explosion blew that burnt straw, blew it right into my canopy. My canopy was closed, but it still blew it through the cracks. As a matter of fact, my face was black from the smoke. And I had some bombs, and this caused one of my bombs to be what they call a hung bomb. That's where the front end releases and the back does not, and that releases the propeller, and the propeller goes off. When the propeller goes off, the bomb is armed, and any jar will make it go off. So I tried every maneuver that you're taught to get rid of the bomb, and I could not. So I asked my friend flying on my wing, I said, looked like any damage to the airplane? Nothing, no fluid coming out, no oil, no nothing. He said, no. He says, you look okay. I said, cool, let's go then. So we're going on a ways, and we come across some troops. So we start strafing these troops. Fortunately, in the strafing, that did the trick getting rid of my hung bomb, so I didn't have to worry about that. Because previously I had a friend of mine who landed with a hung bomb, and as soon as he touched the ground, the bomb went off. And he really had a bad injury. He was mostly burned. So I was glad to get rid of that bomb. So we went, from there we had a lot of missions, quite a few missions, and we would go anywhere because it was easy for us to get down to Hong Kong. So we had one mission to Hong Kong, and I definitely remember this one, because we had a new commanding officer. Our other first one went back because he had too many missions in, and he was getting combat fatigue. This new commanding officer, he was from a training command. So he wanted to go check out Hong Kong, and I'll never forget this. We had one guy on old hose-nosed collops. He went up to him and he says, hey, he says, you been to Hong Kong? He says, yeah. He said, well, you and I, we're going to go to Hong Kong. We're going to fly over so many thousand feet, so many inches of mercury, so many RPMs to conserve gas. Then we're going to come back so many thousand feet, and he's telling all this lieutenant what he's going to do. The commanding officer was a major. So when they got through talking, the lieutenant looked at the major. He said, Major, we go to Hong Kong, we go all guns firing and balls out. He said, none of this slow down stuff. And the major, he was really taken aback by this, but they never did go either, because the lieutenant said he would not go under his conditions. Well, in the future, it turned out that they were going to have a raid on Hong Kong Harbor. There was a convoy in the harbor, and the fighter planes were going to go in there and skip bomb the ships and strafe them. And this new commanding officer, he was on the mission. He was not leading because he wasn't experienced. Matter of fact, I'm not too sure. I may have been his wingman, because 8 planes went in, and I don't remember who all they were, because I don't remember those things. Anyway, all I know is my flight of 4, which that's the way you go. First man was shot down. Third man was shot down. The second one had a great big hole about 2 feet across in his wing. And I got jarred real good, but didn't hurt me. But went in, made the run, skip bomb, dropped the bomb, strafed the ships. You're supposed to pull up and go over the mountains and get together on the other side of the mountains. Well, I looked up where I was supposed to go, and it was solid with anti-aircraft. There's no way. If I pull out and go out over the ocean, go back down the coastline a ways where it was no anti-aircraft, and go back over the mountains. Fortunately, I happened to bump into one of the men that was in my flight. He's the one who had the big hole in his wing. So we started for home, and I happened to look down and see a train going down the track, going from Canton to Hong Kong. So I said, well, I'm going to go down and get it. So I went down and I made 2 or 3 passes at the train itself, strafing the whole train down. Nothing happened. So, well, at least I'll knock the engine out. So second pass on the engine, it blew up. And I got caught in that again. I was a little too low. But anyway, we got destroyed the engine and shot it up and then headed for home. We got back, And after our debriefing, after every mission, you sat down with the intelligence officer and went through everything that happened on the mission and who did what. So after that finished, we went back to our barracks and we had supper. When I say supper, this is kind of comical because we had to eat like the Chinese ate over there. Rice, and more rice. Rice for breakfast with some duck eggs broken into it. For lunch, we have some rice with maybe some little squares of chicken in it to give it some flavor. And for supper, we have rice again with maybe little squares of water buffalo in it to give it some flavor. Anyway, anything to eat tastes good. We went back to our barracks that night. This other man that was with me, we were in the same barracks also. He sat in a chair and kind of fell asleep. His arms got caught in the arms of this chair. Man, he went into a fit. He thought he was captured by the enemy, and he really flipped the lid. Needless to say, he never flew any more missions because he was gone. But the thing is, a flight of 4, I'm the only one who was here untouched. Well, then from this place again, we had another notable mission up to Shanghai. Now, Shanghai and our base, the enemy thought was too far for our fighter planes to fly, and it was. But there was some gasoline stored in a little grass strip in between us and Shanghai that was set there for Doolittle when he was supposed to bomb Japan, and then he was supposed to stop there, gas up, and go back to India. Well, the history would tell you he never got there, so the gasoline was still there. So we flew up to there, stopped, gassed up, and went on up to Shanghai. Well, can't say we caught him off guard because when you get there, the sky was full of everything. I swear I saw a kitchen sink or something up there. They threw everything at you. Anyway, there was 4 airfields, and there was 16 planes. There was supposed to be 4 planes to each field to strafe all the airplanes on the ground and do all the damage we could. In my flight of 4, when we stopped to gas up, one guy went back because he had engine trouble. Well, I was having a little problem myself. My feller was throwing oil, and my windshield was covered with oil. Couldn't see out of the front. But I can't go back, leave only 2. So I stayed with him. Procedures are that half your flight stays up while the other half goes down and strafes the airfield, and then when they finish, they go up for top cover, and the others go down and do their strafing. Well, in this incident, there was only 3 of us, so I stayed for top cover while those 2 went down the strafe. One of them was shot down immediately, and when the other finished, he went up, and I went down to do my strafing. And it was a little difficult for me because I couldn't assume my gun sight and my windshield, so I would have to kick my plane sideways, looking out the side windows and get lined up because the planes were just lined up on a line along the runways. So I get lined up with the plane and they just straighten out and just strafe right down the line. And in doing this, I could see tracers going across my canopy there. I said, well, going too slow. So I make the next pass, I pick up speed. Each time. About the 4th pass, I went straight up as far as high as I could go. I turn around, I come straight down, full throttle. And I'm getting as much speed as I could. And I think I kind of broke some records that time, because when I leveled off on the ground, I was doing 600 miles an hour. And I made my strafing run. By that time, I was out of ammunition. So I pulled up and told my partner up top, I'm coming up. So I start to pull up and go up to join him. There goes a Japanese fighter plane right across my nose. And I don't have any ammunition. So I called up to him, hey, I'm out of ammunition. You got any? Come down and get this guy. He said, I ain't got any either. Man, we better get out of here. So needless to say, we pushed the old throttle to the floor of the instrument panel up there and got the hell out of there. Then we get up to the top, and head for home. And it's common practice is that whenever you go for a mission, the man's leading the flight, and if he gets shot down, someone else is designated to take over to bring the flight back. And if he shut down, someone else is supposed to take it back. Well, it happened that I was tailing Charlie, so the man I was with, he was supposed to bring us home. So I said, okay, let's go. I said, well, what direction we're going to head? He said, I don't know. I said, you kidding me? So I said, okay, I know just about where to go. So I took up a heading. We headed back for our base. And we had a procedure because of the fighter net there. If you saw a town near a river, a railroad, if you go down and buzz this town, they would report you back to fighter control. And then they'd know where you are. So I did this, and I come back up again, and there he's gone again. So I just headed for home. So after a while, I got a call on the radio saying, yeah, you're such and such a place, and take such and such a heading. I said, well, fine, that's just what I'm on. So we're going along, flying, got 3 tanks in a fighter plane. So I run one tank till the engine quit, switched to the other tank, I run it till the engine quit again, went to the 3rd tank, and they got what they call a reserve. There's a standpipe in the tank. If you run out of gas, you always switch to reserve. You got something to bank on. Well, I switched to reserve because the tank said empty. They called the tower, and they said about 50 more miles to go yet. I said, okay, I'm coming in, but I said, if this engine quits, I said, I'm bailing out. The other guy said, well, if you bail out, let me know. I'll bail out with you. I said, what for? I said, you get back. You got gas. I don't. So it happened that I did have enough gas. I told the tower, so I'm coming straight in. I'm short of gas. 2 planes just cracked up on the runway from the same mission. It was damaged. So when they hit the ground, they cracked up. So I said, well, I'll land on a taxi strip. They said, wait till we clear it. I said, no, don't keep them out of my way. I'm coming in. So I landed on the taxi strip. I no more than landed, and I spun around in a circle because one of my tires was shot out. And after I spun in a circle, my engine quit. So that was a good mission to be over. And it's easy one to remember. So from there, well, while we were in Sichuan, we also had a little problem. Every night, as soon as the moon come up, the Japanese would send their bombers over to bomb us. The airfield was located near a Y in the river. And at night when the moon is shining, the river just shines up like a big silver ribbon. So they knew right where we were, so they would come up and just bomb us every night. We had maybe 6, 7, 8 planes in the night coming bombing us. So we used to have gun pits. That took some 50s out of the caliber guns out of the fighters and weld them on top of a post. There'd be 2 men go to the gun pit, and one would shoot the gun while the other would guide the belt of ammunition into the gun, because they just were not made to be operated that way. So this one night, well, happened to be Christmas. Tokyo Rose, which was Tokyo Japanese radio person who always spread propaganda to the Americans, but they played some good music. We like to listen to the music. They said they're going to annihilate this mystery base, which was us. On Christmas night, and that was the first time for Christmas dinner we were going to have pork chops. Where they got them, I don't know, I don't care. But we were going to have pork chops. We just sit down to eat the pork chops, and here's the air raid. I grabbed my pork chop and ate it on the run. There was supposed to be 2 men in the gun pit, but the other guy didn't show, and what happens is I went to the gun pit by myself. Well, they started a new rule. Nobody would shoot unless the lead gun fired, because they said it was giving away our positions. Well, I'm sitting there in the gun pit, and here they come. And I look up there, and he couldn't have been over 100 feet above me. Here comes this bomber. Bomb bay open. I could look right up and see right into his bomb bay. And I wanted to shoot so bad, and I said, oh, I better not. I'll really get it. It's about that time he drops his bombs. And they drop what they call banana bombs. It's a cluster of maybe about 300 little bombs about the size of a banana. And when they get dropped so far, they disperse and spread out, and it's like an anti-personnel bomb. You get all the people. And plus they drop some 500-pound bombs too. Well, I looked up. And he drops those, and I see it's going to fall right in my pit. So in the gun pit, you got a little side trench that you can go in to protect yourself in case something does go right in the trench. And it's at a right angle. Well, at the right angle, it kind of caved in. So it wasn't giving me much protection, but I got a little small ball back in that corner. It was a good thing because the bombs landed right in my pit. Some of them exploded and some didn't. So after the air raid was over, I get out of the pit and I go out down the side of the mountain where they're supposed to pick me up. Just as I get out of the pit, there's a big 500-pound bomb there that didn't explode. So I got out of there in a hurry. I didn't just want to stick around for that. And they picked me up in the Jeep. I told them what had happened. Again, that was another memorable time that kind of hard to forget that one. So they did eventually run us out of this base. Gotta look at my notes here. Oh yeah, we did have another abortion at this same base. An abortion is when you don't complete your mission. We started out to go to a target, but the ceiling was kind of low, and when you fly low to avoid their radar detection of the enemy. So we were flying low, and all of a sudden the clouds just zonked right in. As you nowhere to go. So I went up into the clouds, and again I lost track of the clouds. I ended up going up through the clouds by myself to get on top. No one around. Well, I knew about where to head back for home, so I headed back to the base. I was flying about 11,000 feet to get over the overcast, because it was about 10,000 feet thick. So I'm getting back, and I know I'm getting close to my base, so I call them, tell them this is where I am. It's like above the overcast. I don't know where the field is. I have no way of knowing. We had no homers or anything there. So I says, when I get near there, you tell me where I am and how to fly to get right over the field. As when I'm right over the field, I said, I'll dive down through the overcast. So they did, and I got over the field. They said, okay, so I dove down through the overcast and landed. They thought I was lost. Well, I was lost, but I found my way back. So again, there's another little, you don't go on any mission, but it was hair-raising anyway. Well, there's a lot more experiences there, but I can't recall any of them. But anyway, the Japanese, they did run us out of that base because we were causing them too much problems. And went back to our headquarters again at Cheng-Kung. And again, we had to wait for them to get us another strip ready to go forward. Wasn't behind enemy lines this time, but it called Lo Wan Ping. And flew several missions from there, and I really don't recall any big exciting ones there. I flew a lot of them, but I don't remember what they were. Where you go out and look for troops again, and shoot up the troops, shoot up the ammunition trucks and supplies, whatever. So this was getting to be about time for me to come home because they had two policies. One is either you flew 50 minutes and you go home. So my year was up in August, so I should have come home in 1st September, but that was about the time when the war was over, so they would not let any individuals go home because our whole squadron was going to go home together. So that's how it happened. Went back to Calcutta by transport plane. And in Calcutta we had to wait for, get enough people together and get organized for to get aboard a ship to go home. I can remember one night in Calcutta we slept in tents. And I don't know why, who, or what caused it, but a bunch of jackals go through our area, right through our tents. I don't know what they was chasing or who was chasing them, but they went right through our tents and make your hair go up a little bit. But then we got aboard ship in Calcutta to head for home. And this was a ship what they call the general class, which is not too big of a ship. It was loaded to the gills. There was no empty space whatever. So we start back for the United States, going through the Indian Ocean and going through the Mediterranean. And it was really beautiful seeing those flying fish and porpoise and what have you out there along the water, and seeing some of the pyramids along the banks. But then we got out of the Mediterranean and hit the Atlantic Ocean, right near the Rock of Gibraltar. It was a terrific storm. And I mean, it was a real bad one. Standing on the rail of the ship, and you look up, you can see the waves go way up above you, 50 feet or so, and then you look down, you can almost see the keel of the ship again. Needless to say, everybody was sick. And even the crew was sick on that one. I used to go to the mess hall. They only fed you 2 meals a day aboard ship. I'd go to the mess hall and say, well, how about some food? Nope, that's all you get. But I went down to eat this time, and they said, want more, want more. Nobody was eating. So I eat and run back up on top of the deck and stand along the rail in the middle of the ship where you didn't get the full benefit of the ship tossing and turning. But anyway, we got back to the Staten Island, got back to Port Sheridan again, and returned home, which I was glad to be. This was in the middle of November or so. It took that long to get home. I was aboard ship for 30 days or more. And stayed home, get back to the grocery business again. I stayed in the reserves. And we used to go to meetings, once a month for an evening. Then they got a new deal called a corollary unit in the reserves, where you were part duplication of the unit down at Chiounard Air Force Base. And I happened to be assigned as a base exchange officer at Chiounard. So we go down 2 days a month down there for training. And then we go 2 weeks in the month for some more fighter training. I go down to Chiounard, keep up my flying time all the time, go down there and ask if they had a plane available, and I can get in, fly, get my flying time in. And then all of a sudden they call the whole unit back to active duty. I don't remember just when it was. It was 1951, early 51. They called the whole unit to duty. And I took over the base exchange at Chiounard, which was quite an experience. It was really a little heavy for me to handle because I'm not used to anything big like that, because you're in charge of retail stores, snack bars, gas stations, repair shops, hotels, and you're in charge of everything. Anyway, it worked out fine. It was a very good experience for me. I was also on the general staff, so we have a meeting once a week to decide what is to be done, who's to do what. Of course, he's always asking me to get a lot of big improvements in the exchange. So anyway, one day some orders come through for me to go to fighter training. You go to fighter training for 30 days, and then to Korea you go in combat. The general says, well, what do you think of combat? I said, I think I've had enough. Okay, I'll see what I can do for you. So he got me off those orders, and they put me on orders to go to Japan to take over a exchange in Japan. I'm trying to remember the name of the town it was, where I was supposed to go. Anyway, I was out to Tokyo, and from Tokyo I was supposed to be assigned out. And anyway, when I got there, someone had already taken over that base exchange. Kawasaki, that's where it was. Anyway, they gave me two choices. I could stay in Japan and be the staff exchange officer, and your job was to fly to all the exchanges in Japan, Korea, and the islands to inspect them and see that everything was going right and solve all problems. I said, well, how long can it be before I get my family here? I said, well, it'll be about 18 months before you get your family here. And I said, well, then after they get here, how long do I have to stay? Oh, I have to stay 4 years after they get here. Well, if I go to Korea, how long do I have to stay there? Oh, if you go to Korea, you only have to be there for a year. What do you got in Korea? So that 5th Air Force Headquarters exchange that I went over there to take over in Daegu, Korea. It's the 5th Air Force Headquarters. And there they had quite a job because it was a very small, basic, little bitty one-room exchange. And I managed to get a bigger building and get it fixed up so it had some decent facilities there for an exchange to provide for the servicemen. Because we had to go down to the main air base, which is maybe 20 miles away, and pick up supplies and bring them back to the exchange. And when we did that, it would be maybe 4 or 5 6x6 truckloads of merchandise. And in the past, I always have just myself go with a bunch of Koreans who drove the trucks and Koreans who helped load the trucks and unload them. And I begged for a while. I said, give me one GI to help me as a guard duty for these convoys. Oh, we ain't got the men. I said, just one man, just for a few hours a day. So finally they did give me one man. I was sure glad of that. Because on that trip, we had 4 trucks. So I let him be in the lead truck, and I stayed in the behind truck. And one of the guys, well, I found out later that he was faking truck trouble. He didn't have any trouble, really. So I said, okay, we can't leave this truck alone, or we said we can't go in alone, one or the other. I said, fine, if you take these trucks into the base and call the motor pool and send someone out here. I'll stay with this one. And it's a good thing I did, because I think this was all planned by the Koreans, that they would pull that deal and they would hijack the whole damn truckload of merchandise. They didn't realize that I had an extra GI that day, so that followed them up. So he got back and sent one of the motor pool men out. What happened is the driver he wasn't shifting it right. Now I think he did it on purpose so that he just wanted to stall the truck. They were going to hijack the whole damn thing. Anyway, we got back. No troubles there. So, well, not too much exciting happened while I was there. Although they gave me a lot of jobs. I started out as a base exchange officer, but I ended up having quite a few. I'm just trying to remember. Hard to even remember all of them. A base exchange officer, and then I was also the general's protocol officer. Of course, that may put me on the board of meetings every week. And I was the billeting officer, special service officer, laundry officer, ration breakdown officer, civilian personnel officer, mortuary officer. All total, I think I had 10 titles at the time. But nothing too explosive happened here, routine stuff. So when I was finished there, I declined to accept an indefinite commission. There was a rule passed in Washington that if those who didn't accept the indefinite commission were to be home and discharged from service by May 1st. Well, I didn't accept the indefinite commission. I was ready to come home and quit. But they wanted me to take over another job there in headquarters, and they said, we'll give you a promotion and be here 30 days, and then you'll be able to go home. But I said, I didn't sign the commitment. I said, we'll take care of that. I said, nope, I'm going to grocery business. So that I did. I was supposed to be home by May 1st and discharged, and here it was the middle of May. So we were in the meeting with the general, with the group, and it happened to be around Easter time. You're going to have a lot of big dignitaries coming, and generals of the chaplains and everything else. And of course, I was a general's protocol officer, so I was to help arrange and take care of billeting these people, finding them beds and transportation, because I was a motor pool officer too. So one of the guys popped up and says, "Well, how can you do this? You're not even in the military." The general said, "Well, what is this?" Well, he says, he's supposed to be home and discharged by the 1st of May, and here it was a couple of weeks into May. And this guy says, "Well," says, "I'm the finance officer." He says, "You can't get your pay." Well, I said, "I get my pay, or I take my 45, go down there and collect it." So the general, he says, "What's going on?" So I told him, well, so there was a little shortage in the exchange. They had a Board of Officers investigation, and everything was cleared. It was taking too long to go through channels. I said, "There's a colonel sitting on it up there in the office." I said, "I offered to hand carry it back and get it through, but had to go back because they didn't follow the format on the original write-up." Well, he said, "What's quickest to get it done? To do that?" Or, well, I said, "They got two ways. Your new Board of Officers to go through this again, or hand carry those back and have them rewrite it and send it through again." Well, he said, "The Board of Officers will meet tomorrow morning." So they did. And the next day, he says, "Well, you can go, but you have to have someone sign for you as proxy." I said, "No." I said, "They wait another day, and I'll sign my own. There's no proxy." Well, they did. And that day, commanding officer, he got his private plane, brought me to Japan. I think I was in Japan for about an hour, and I was on a plane for home. And get to California, I had sent all my money home because I didn't anticipate going home until after the next payday. I'm getting to California, I don't even have fare for nothing. Not even money for food. I was there about a week or so. About a week, I guess. I don't remember really. Finally, I collected what they call travel pay. I could collect that to get home, and I got home on the travel pay. But then for my last month's service, I had to file a claim. It took about 6 months to get. Anyway, I was glad to be out of service. That was the end of that. So now, go back to the business, grocery business in Kankakee, and I want to make some expansion there, and the other partners are not really of it. So I moved to Morris in 1954 to start a grocery store in Morris. And as of now, it's 45 years later, and the store is closed, and now semi-retired, working part-time in a liquor store. So far, that is it. Thank you. Hope all of you enjoyed it. Now, okay, here's what they call a blood chit. This was a little flag-like that was sewn on the inside of your jacket, so in case you were shot down during a mission, that there was written on here telling the Chinese to return you to your air base and they would receive a reward. You can't see anything on here because it's so worn out. I wore this thing all the time I was there, so I don't know if it would have done me much good if I was shot down toward the end. They couldn't read it anyway. Okay, here's one of the later models of the P-51. Now this one had some rockets on the wings that we could fire with great accuracy. We could hit a target with no problem at all, which sometimes is a little problem when you're using bombs of some kind to try and drop a bomb where you want. It's a little difficult. But with these rockets, well, we could lay it right on a target and nothing flatten and destroy it completely without any problem at all. Now here's one of the earlier models of the P-51. This is what's called P-51C. As you can see, we lost all the P-40s, and they were starting to bring in some Cs, and then later the Ds, which was a newer model. But you can see on here my name and the name of my crew chief, which these crew chiefs were very conscientious. That airplane was their baby. This is a close-up shot here, and you can see my name and the crew chief's name up there, and what I called my airplane, which is what I said I would do whenever I went to target. I would not fool around. I would be in and out as fast as that old plane would go. Of course, doing all that damage I could in the process, which was plenty at most of the time. We really did quite a job over there in strafing. There's a squad picture of some of the men in our squadron. Now, when I first joined the squadron, there was only 18 pilots. But as the time went on, they got a lot of replacement pilots coming in from the United States. And this picture here was taken probably around November of '44, and we had a lot of pilots in, about 50. This was just before we went to Sichuan, which was behind enemy lines. And of course, while we were there, quite a few of these men were shot down, walked back, killed. So they were thinned out after this because things got pretty rough. And this is a picture of the P-47. I flew that one when I was in Florida. We took our complete training in that plane, but after a while they changed their mind and took that plane away from us and replaced it, and we retrained in P-40s. This was quite an airplane, had 8 50 caliber machine guns. And we're going back here to our P-51C in China, showing a fuller picture of the plane and myself, which you see a little more of what the plane looked like. Now, this is a picture of myself and my crew chief. As I said, those crew chiefs were very conscientious, and they took care of that plane like nobody's business. They would feel a little put out sometimes when you come back and the plane was full of holes. But I couldn't do anything about that. And this is a picture of some of the medals that I have. I don't really know what most of them are for anymore. They're just kind of gone out of my mind. And this is a picture of a board that my daughter Sherry and her husband Doug had made up for me. Put all my medals and some pictures and memorabilia, insignias, China, Burma, Flying Tigers, my rank and what have you. And very nice. I really appreciated that. As you can see, it's all combined, shows everything in one picture, which is real nice. And there's some pictures of the medals. Don't ask me what they're for, because I don't really remember. There's quite a few of them. They're for different campaigns and wars that I took part in, and some medals for, well, the Air Medal is one of them. I don't know which one it is, which was given to me after flying 25 combat missions. After you fly 50 combat missions, you would get the Distinguished Flying Cross, but I didn't quite make that. I only got up to 32 missions, and the war was over. So I see that one says Korea on there, so that explains that one. But these others, I don't even remember what they are. I'd have to sit down and look them up. Not that big of a deal anyway. They're just some medals for things that I've done. So, this is what's called the China, Burma, India insignia that you wore on one sleeve of your shirt or jacket. Of course, there we didn't wear any of these things on our jackets because we didn't want the enemy to know what we were if we were shot down. This is the officer's insignia that was worn on the front of your cap, which is every officer wore. So it's nothing distinguished. And this is the Flying Tiger patch that was worn on the other sleeve of your shirt to indicate where you were and what you belonged to. Now this is an insignia worn on your sleeve when I was an aviation cadet. That insignifies what you were at the time. All these insignias, that's what they do. Again, here's a picture of some of the medals. And here is in Korea, headquarters 5th Air Force in Daegu, Korea. This is our mess hall. And you can see me in the center facing this way on the other side of the table. And this was taken in front of the headquarters. It was an old school that was taken over by the 5th Air Force to be their headquarters. And had a lot of shrubbery around there, quite elaborate. And this is a close-up. You wouldn't know it, but that time I weighed 210 pounds. The food over there was terrific. Best food I ever had in the service. All food was grown in Japan, hydroponic farms. So the food was terrific. We're bouncing back to the old P-51C back in China here. Close up there. And there's another close-up sitting in the P-51D, which was the later model. See, I always had a cigar stub in my mouth. It was not lit because you wouldn't dare smoke a cigar while you're flying. Okay, this just about winds up most of my experiences in the service, and I hope that everyone enjoys it, because I enjoy telling it. Thank you very much.